I think that it's worth mentioning that in an attempt to avoid an overuse of certain words or phrases, I could end up sounding unnatural or even downright incorrect. That will undoubtedly be quite challenging for me to overcome, but hopefully that will become easier as I do both more of these videos and continue on writing instead of just reading and consuming the language passively. So hopefully I'll be able to incorporate more interesting and intricate variations of certain commonly used phrases and idioms as I continue with this endeavor. So that was one thing I wanted to mention. Another one was something that I don't think I have said before regarding the Asterix and Obelix universe, and that's that a lot of the names of the characters in the story, or maybe even all of them, I'm not exactly well versed in the origin of names, but most of the names, at least in my native language, are a combination of the suffix ix and a prefix which is comprised of a word, usually a pun or a joke-ish twisted word. For example, the oldest character in the village is called in English geriatrics, which is self-explanatory. On the other hand, in my language, he's called archaics, as in archaic or very old. There are other such examples as majestatics, who's derived from the word majestic, or from the first live action movie where the super old druid is called uh, Methusalix, which is derived from the word Methusalem. Then there is Trubadix, uh, which is from troubadour, which is another word for bard. The names are inconsistent in between the releases, which I've mentioned already, and that was quite confusing. But most of the time, the names that are truly important, like Panoramics, Asterix, Obelix, Idefix, those stay the same. I think they are the same in the French version as well. Obviously, I've never read that because my French is abysmal. But in English, I know that some of the names are very different. For example, the word, the name of the druid, Getafix, uh, is a play on getting a fix, as in getting the strengthening potion in this sense, obviously, because this is a children's book, obviously, and means just the person that distributes the strengthening potion. There are many such examples. That's about what I wanted to say. Then there is the Asterix and the Goths, which starts with an annual druid competition where Panoramix is going to compete for the title Druid of the Year, and our heroes Asterix and Obelix are both quite nervous about letting him go by himself, and rightfully so, because a Roman patrol is ambushed by some Goths that intend to capture the Druid of the Year and use his powers and skills to conquer both the goal and the Rome itself. but oblivious to this particular event. Our heroes continue on their journey. They meet another druid and another patrol of Roman legionnaire, and they have to prove that they are actually druids going to attend that competition. So they prove that by feeding one of the legionnaires a specific weed that makes him only produce donkey noises, to which the commander of this patrol notes that that didn't really change him that much, and off they go. They are allowed to continue towards the forest. Then only the druids can enter, and both Asterix and Obelix to wait in front. I still remember that image that really stuck with me since childhood, where an owl is seen tapping on its temple with its wing as if it was a finger, which is a gesture I don't think that English has anything like that, but I know that in my nation and Germany and France, it's a gesture to indicate that you think the person that you are showing that to is not exactly smart. Um, the closest thing I can think of to compare it to in English would be a face palm, but it's not exactly that. It's just similar. Or maybe you are trying to ask if the person is being serious right now in a very exasperated manner, and that owl is making that gesture towards a woodpecker who's been doing his woodpecking thing on the tree that the owl was inhabiting, and she's just reclining from a hole in that tree, looking at the woodpecker who almost cut the entire tree down with his beak, and that's just a small, tiny, inconsequential panel. It's in the background when they are walking towards the forest, and it just makes me cackle every time I see it. I've reread some of the volumes since I started recording the videos on Asterix, and they are very short. It doesn't really take that much time, but every time I see them now as an adult, I discover some new hidden pun or meaning that I wasn't able to completely appreciate as a child, and now as an adult, it's a source of fun and just innocent happiness. So back to the story. Panoramic twins, and as they were ready to do so, the Goths kidnap him, and later on, when Asterix and Obelix start to get nervous, they actually enter the forest, even though it's supposedly forbidden, and they find out that the gods had kidnapped Panoramics, and there is only a helmet left on the ground to point them in the correct direction. Meanwhile, the gods return to Germany, and after a series of fortunate or unfortunate accidents, they finally make it back to their chieftain, presenting their druid and forcing a translator to persuade the druid into making the potion under the threat of execution. On the other hand, our heroes are making their way through more Roman patrols, and after a series of accidents, usually related to some poor legionnaire, they get themselves thrown into the jail by the Goths, and finally reunite with panoramics, concocting a devious scheme to feed the strengthening potion to the Goths so that they begin fighting against each other for the chieftain position, and instead of trying to invade the Gaul and the Rome. So they, under the guise of making their last Gaul meal, a soup, they make the potion, feed it to the unfortunate translator, who then proceeds to become the chieftain. Then they feed the potion to the previous chieftain, and then continue to do so with other beaten Goths, who then proceed to create armies and fight against each other for the position of the ultimate chieftain of all Goths, which plays exactly into the plan that the Gauls made prior to this. On their way back home, they once more run into this legionnaire who's been a gag character through this volume, always reporting the invasions, even making it rather confusing as Goths were invading Germany, then Gauls were invading Germany, and then Gauls were invading Gaul. So for the last time, uh, they are now returning back home, successfully rescuing the druid and ending the possible threat of invasion from the Goths, who are now preoccupied by their own conflict. Both Gaul and Rome are currently safe. This one I remember a bit more clearly, since I think I've gotten this volume way later than its position in the numerical order, since this is the third volume and I got this volume way later. So more memories remained firmly, like the owl, and even the legionnaire reporting the invasions is still live in my mind, even without me rereading the volumes again. And that's the third volume. I think I'll continue chronologically for a bit more, but I'm going to skip some volumes in favor of their animated movie or live action movie adaptations, since some of them are very well done and I think it's worth talking about them. Also, I didn't have the access to some of the volumes, as I've mentioned, and only ever came into contact with the stories through these movies. So I'll be talking about them later on.